Hello and welcome to Legalese. I'm Ernie Hyde, your host, and this show is brought to you by the Northern Middlesex Bar Association on a monthly basis. We're going to be talking about drug courts this time around. May is National Drug Court Month, and so I have two very special guests with me today. Barbara SAVITT PEARSON, who is Justice at the Lowell District Court, and Michael J. Brooks, who is Justice at the Lawrence District Court, both of whom have had the pleasure of serving at the Air District Court in their drug court, and Concord, I should add. So welcome.
Thank you.
Let's begin talking about what drug court really is. So Judge Brooks, why don't you start with a description of what it is.
Well, in Massachusetts, first of all, drug courts are post-dispositional, so they're not separate courts per se. They're really probation sessions. They are held in a courtroom that focus on people who are drug addicts, high-risk, high-need people who receive intensive supervision as opposed to a less intensive supervision that would be given to a probationer not on drug court. So it's just important to remember that it's not really a separate court, but we call them that because they focus on a particular individual with a drug problem.
Okay, we should also talk about drugs which include alcohol.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And so some areas of the country, and actually there are some, I think, in Massachusetts as well, that have DWI courts, is what they call them. We don't have DWI in Mass, so I don't know why we call it that. But those are driving while intoxicated courts. Very similar in nature?
Very.
Yep. Okay.
In terms of the training that team members, that is the judge, the prosecutor, the defense counsel, the provider of services receive, it's virtually the same training for DWI courts and drug courts.
Okay. And Judge Pearson, why don't you tell us a little bit about the makeup of who participates in drug court, not necessarily just the clients or the defendants, but who else participates?
People who participate in drug court, beginning with the judge, include the prosecutor, the defense attorney, police officers from either one or more than one department within the community that the court serves, treatment providers, and the probation department. Okay. And that basically makes up what we call a drug court team, who all are working to empower each participant in drug court to maintain sobriety, to get to sobriety, maintain sobriety, and enter back into the community safely, drug-free.
And how long of a program is it typically?
The drug court program ideally is 1 year. However, it's unusual for someone to get through with 1 year or in 1 year. Very often we send our participants to residential programs. Some are in jail when they accept a drug court disposition, which may include incarceration at the beginning, then residential, which is up to 6 months, and then you appear before the court for phases 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are less and less involved with the court, so that you might see the judge every week for the first 3 months. If you get through 3 months of sobriety and you attend to all your responsibilities, then you can go into phase 2. We have a phase-up program where you apply for phase 2. And if the team and the judge thinks that you are amenable to phase 2, you'll do that so that you will have less people that are expecting things from you. You get a little more freedom, but you see the court maybe every 2 weeks, and then it goes to phase 3 every 3 weeks, and then once a month. Anytime during those phases, however, if you relapse or you go AWOL or something happens, you may go back a phase or 2 or 3. So I would say the average person takes between 1.5 to 2 years to get through a 1 year program.
Okay. Now, National Drug Court Month, this is the 25th year, I believe, for drug courts, and the first one was Miami?
Yes, Judge Schwartz.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And Judge Brooks, how many drug courts do we have in the U.S. at this point?
About 2,800, I believe.
About 2,800. And any idea how many people they serve?
I think it's 140, 50,000 people, a lot of people, and they're in every state at this point has some form of drug court. One of the important things to remember is that drug court is not generally a cookie cutter approach. That is, every state does not do drug court the same way. There are drug courts that are diversion type programs. There are drug courts that are predisposition. There are drug courts that are post-disposition. In Massachusetts, as I said earlier, they're all a condition of probation. So by definition, either your case has been resolved and that one of your conditions of probation is that you enter drug court. And there's usually 3 ways that you would enter drug court. One would be through the resolution of your criminal case. The second would be through the resolution of a violation of probation. And the third would be by an agreement between a probation officer and the probationer that they that they want to just change the conditions and that the new condition would include drug court.
And that's the post-disposition
It's all
nature
post-disposition.
of
So
the drug court.
the sentence would include enter complete drug court as a condition of probation, just as it might include no use of drugs or alcohol, and submit to random tests, etc., all of which would also be components of a drug court program.
Mhm. Okay, and one of the reasons that drug court came about was allegedly to save money. Have we been doing that?
Well, I think we're saving lots of money. That was one of the reasons, it is one of the reasons actually now that our trial court, starting with Chief Justice Carey, Chief Justice Dolly in the district court, and Harry Spence, who's the court administrator, are behind drug court very strongly. As a matter of fact, it's one of the priorities in the long-range strategic plan of the trial court is to increase drug courts because they do save money as one component. They save lives, they change people's lives around, they make communities safer, all by empowering sobriety. I would suggest that 95% of our cases, if not more, have drugs and alcohol as factors relating to behavior, not an excuse, but the behavior, which can, if the person qualifies after a strict assessment as a high-risk, high-need person, that person comes to drug court, and all of those goals, I think, are met by the end of that person's success in drug court.
Okay. And the alternative to drug court in many cases would be incarceration. Is that true?
Correct.
So the difference between what we spend on people in drug court, which is, for the most part, still in the community if they're not inpatient, and those who are incarcerated is significant, we should say.
Is that, the last number that I heard in terms of the cost to keep someone incarcerated for a year was $43,000. And I know in the program in AIR a few years ago, we tried to figure out how much it cost per participant, and I think it was about $5,000 to the completion of the program.
Right.
And that was really, all of that cost, if not, I should say almost all that cost, was treatment cost, because
Right,
the
because a lot of
judges
the
on
other ones are
salary,
already
the
there.
DA's
Right.
on salary, the probation officer's on salary. The attorney has some cost, but they're certainly not paid the value of their real time. So, drug court is unquestionably more cost effective, but if it didn't work substantively for the people, it wouldn't matter whether it was cost effective. If drug court didn't produce results, it's what's called, and it's considered an evidence-based program. That is, that there are studies of drug courts nationally that show that, in fact, drug courts do work in reducing recidivism and keeping people clean and sober. And those are really the goals that you want to have. I mean, in essence, to me, the larger goal is that you really want to change the quality of the life of the person who's in drug court. And I think, I know as Judge Pearson has experienced at least as much as I have, is the depths that people are in when they start drug court.
Yeah.
And sometimes they are able to get out of it, and we're able to help them really become happy, healthy, productive people, and it doesn't always happen that way. And one of the other offshoots that's a wonderful corollary to it all is having babies that are born drug-free.
Right.
I know in AIR alone, we had 5 or 6 clients in the program who delivered babies who were drug-free because the mother was clean, and she was clean to a large degree because she was in drug court.
Which is a significant savings in and of itself, just
to the government.
Oh.
To
the treatment of those babies.
Right, I
if
think
they're
that, again, the
drug
statistic that
addicted.
I've heard, I think it's $1 million from the age
Sure.
from birth to age 18 of government funds that go to help support in
Right.
various
addicted.
ways a drug-addicted child.
Right. Okay, and so in addition to, one of the things you said, Judge Pearson, was that, actually it was Judge Brooks, I think, who said that all of the drug courts in various states are structured a different way. But there is a national standard, right?
There are 10
Yes.
key components.
Okay, and Judge Pearson, you want to go through some of those?
Well, the 10 key components basically are accountability to the court, well, target population. You know, make sure that the person is appropriate for drug court and that you
Right.
don't mix people. So we structure our drug courts in basic compliance so that a person has an assessment to determine whether they're appropriate for drug court. Sometimes it's not a seat of the pants assessment. It's well documented, and people who are targeted high risk, high need people are more likely to succeed. Difficult to believe, but people who have long records and spend most of their lives in jail, and now they're in their mid-30s, and they just are going to change their way they live. They're going to die or overdose, or they're going to change. So
Right.
anyway, so you target the population. You have accountability to the court. You are required as a judge, for example, to spend at least 3 minutes with each person each day, each time they're in front of you, so that you get to know the person. And we get to know a lot about the people that are in front of us. And we do that. We have team meetings where everyone, the judge makes the final decision as to what's going to
Yeah,
happen.
that's important. I want you. wanted you
But
to
the
say that.
team provides information to the court as to how the person is doing in treatment. And so we have the meetings that facilitate that, and that's another key component. Keeping jail sentences to a minimum with treatment as the optimum is one of the components. On the other hand, we are very blessed in Massachusetts, especially in our county, and actually in both of our counties, Essex, where Judge Brooks sits, and Middlesex, where I sit, because the sheriffs have provided terrific programs in the jails. Now, it's still $45,000 in jail versus
Right.
out of jail.
Right.
However, when you are waiting and when someone is at risk of killing themselves or overdosing and they need a place while they're waiting for a residential, then we have jails available. So I think that's the one part of the key components that I take a little bit of disagreement with. And it's only because it's not really it is a punishment, clearly. Liberty's taken away.
Right.
But they have an opportunity now, and the sheriff in Middlesex has, by law, you have to separate those who are committed and those who are waiting. And a lot of our people are not committed. They are on probation, as Judge Brooks said, and they're waiting for treatment. But they will be endangering themselves if they don't stay in a locked facility awaiting the residential. So those are some of the components, and we adhere to them. And then there are lots, the sanctions and the risks and the rewards that one gets. Very few people in drug court, depends where you are, have people saying, good job, because they've been drug addicted so long that they've alienated their families, their friends, the people they're with are not supportive other than to keep the habit going. So when the judge says, good job this week, you did everything you were asked for, and you come in with a good attitude, and all systems are go, good job. And that means volumes to the person.
Yeah, and I think it means a whole lot more than you think it does, because my participation in drug court many times, dealing face-to-face on a regular basis with the client, and it is important that they're able to step in front of a judge and feel comfortable doing that for the first time in their life, and actually having a two-way conversation with a judge as opposed to the judge telling them that they're going to jail.
Right.
And it's a completely different court.
Well, for example, I mean, I think every judge does their own drug court differently.
Sure. Yep.
But the only difference in the way I do drug court as opposed to regular court is, but I think it's a big difference, is I call the probationers by their first name. I sit on the bench, I wear my robe. Some judges stand in front of the bench, some judges don't wear a robe. Some judges unzip their robe. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of different variations on the theme, but it is a much more, you actually have a real relationship with the probationer, and they do with you, because you see them every week. Judge Pearson mentioned that, we're encouraged, and it's found to be a best practice, that the judge would talk to every probationer for 3 minutes. That doesn't sound like a long time, but sometimes it's very difficult to get a 3-minute conversation with people because they're not used to talking to judges, or they're not used to being verbal or expressing their feelings. And so, it becomes a big challenge, frankly, but it becomes evident with people who actually decide they're going to try and be sober, and they're actually going to try and complete drug court, that they are engaging the judge, and that they see the judge as someone, and as a representative of the team, that they want to please, frankly. And so when they do something well, as Judge Pearson says, you need to acknowledge it. They don't get much affirmation in their life.
Right,
One of the
right.
things we do that some people might think it's hokey, I would have thought it was hokey until I saw it in operation, is when someone has a good week, we applaud. Now again, it sounds, how big a deal could that be? It's a big deal. And in fact, more importantly, when they have a bad week, the lack of applause is even more significant.
Deafening. It's
Absolutely.
deafening. Yes.
And again, I think it's one of those things that you have to see it to understand the effect that the affirmation or the absence of affirmation has on people. And I always say that the people who succeed at drug court, and I think we all would agree, we've all worked with addicts all our life professionally. First, you never know for a person what's going to make them decide to be sober. But in drug court, what I have observed, and just my own observation, is that when the person decides they want to be sober and use drug court to be sober, as opposed to just finish drug court and get off probation, that's the difference.
Oh, yes.
When they've made a real commitment to being sober. And it takes a while to get there. And at the beginning, they've just come off using drugs, or they're still using drugs, and they're in no condition to make rational decisions, frankly, which is why there's so much structure at the beginning. And as Judge Pearson said, as they proceed through the program and the phases, the structure is diminished so that by the end, we hope they've internalized enough of what they've learned about being sober so that the last phase, which is the longest phase, they can, on their own, remain sober.
Yeah, I can't think of too many people that came into drug court that were thrilled to be there in the beginning.
No, even though it's voluntary.
It's voluntary because the alternative is jail. So
That's right.
from that point of view, it's voluntary.
Well, in the sense that
you have a
people's-
choice.
Right, you don't have to go to drug court.
Exactly. But still not thrilled to be there.
No.
And
And they're even less
you
thrilled.
see that light bulb go on after a while.
Well, when you
You
do,
do.
and sometimes, and
remarkable.
often you never see the light bulb go on,
That's
and
true.
they do poorly, and they end up in jail, or worse.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's true. Support for the drug court. Who pays for all of this? In the very beginning, when I got involved, it was the justice system, Justice Department.
Right. Bureau of
people-
Justice Assistance.
Yeah, right. That conducted a lot of the training and support and so on and so forth. Who's supporting it nowadays? And how is it done?
Well, the federal government has given a lot of money
right.
for drug courts and drug court training. And Judge Brooks and I both have attended several drug court trainings within the last 2 years, even in Massachusetts, because we've had some grants. I think long term, the hope of the trial court is that the trial court will be able to fund it with help from DPH. Presently, there are drug courts that are under grants from the federal government. We've applied for grants in other drug courts. The problem is that grants run out, and you want to sustain this so that it becomes part of the judicial system
Right.
long term.
Right.
But the providers, as I say, we work very closely with DPH, DMH as well. Unfortunately, a lot of the people, when they maintain sobriety, mental health issues come up and start bubbling up, and we have to deal with that too. But we're working through that. So we do, and they're private insurers, but mostly it's Mass Health and the court system. And as Judge Brooks said, we are on salary, and it's just part of our daily work, but drug court is just a session of the court.
Right.
But I worked in the Haverhill Drug Court and the Worcester Drug Court years ago, where those were both granted by the federal government, and then the grant runs out, and then that's the end of the drug court. So we have to work on sustainability, and I think that's a long-term
But I think
goal.
now there's more focus on drug courts in Massachusetts for a long time. I mean,
Oh, no, I mean...
10 years, there was none.
No, I think in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a change. I mean, those of us who worked in drug courts, we were outliers. I mean, we were,
Yeah.
I don't want to say outcasts,
You're on
but
your
pretty
own.
close.
You're on your own,
And there
yeah.
really was no institutional support for drug court. There was
Right.
support in the sense of that the drug courts were allowed to exist.
Right.
But there wasn't much institutional momentum behind drug courts expanding or anything like that.
Support.
And now it's a completely different landscape. And in fact, as Judge Pearson said, expanding drug courts and supporting drug courts is one of the goals of the trial court. Which
Strategic
is,
plan.
we never thought that would come to that 5 years ago. I wouldn't have dreamed that would be the case.
Well, interestingly, if I might break in for
Sure.
a minute, drug courts were originally favored by the defense bar because it was a way to avoid jail. And I think those tables have turned so that the police departments, the district attorney's offices have seen that public safety has been increased by the use of drug courts. Breaking and entering of the cars and houses, larceny, shoplifting, everything from shoplifting up to armed robbery. Heroin addicted people are committing crimes, and as I said, never an excuse for behavior. We got to cut it, and so I think that those with the police and the district attorneys saying that this is making our people safer, is it making our communities safer?
Yeah.
So that's changed the landscape a little bit also, and the perception that this was a hug-a-thug court.
I was going to bring that phrase up. Yep,
Okay, well,
yep.
you know, that how light are we? Well, that's not the reality. The reality is that relapse happens, and we see relapse on, and you learn what the triggers are as someone who's drug dependent, and you learn to get strategies to avoid those. But recidivism is way down, and so that's what makes the drug courts very acceptable to the community at large, because now you don't have the revolving door of going in jail, coming out, not changing your behavior, not treating your addiction, committing another crime, go back to jail, and the expense of that to the community, to the safety. We want to be able to sleep at night.
Right.
And if we're worried about our houses being broken into and our cars being broken into, and we don't treat people, then we're going to have more house breaks and more car breaks.
Yeah.
So it's a safety.
Well, national statistics talk about there being 75% of the participants in drug court never arrested again, and that is significant.
It is.
I mean, when you compare that to people who have done time in prison, as you say, 30, 40, 50 years old, and they're still doing it, huge difference,
Huge.
Yeah.
right?
No question about it.
Okay. So let's just talk a little bit about treatment, because that's obviously the main component of drug court. But that treatment takes various forms.
It does.
One is outpatient, for instance, or being left in the community while you receive your treatment. And the other is inpatient. Can you explain the difference between the two? Other than being
Well,
sort of confined to a building and not confined
well,
to a
I
building.
think least restrictive is always what you try first.
Try first.
And so
Exactly.
if you have a supportive network, whether it's family or somewhere where you can live in a drug-free environment, and you think somehow that, or the treatment team feels that you can try it on your own, then we do. Unfortunately, drug addicts have a very difficult time because their support network is not very strong at the time they're entering drug court. And there are different things going on at home. There might be drug dependency throughout the family or throughout the relationship. It might be a toxic relationship in which they live. And they're really not ready. And you put someone on a bracelet and put them in a toxic environment, it's not going to work,
Right.
which is a little more restrictive than saying do it on your own. We have intensive outpatient programs that are available to some people, but that requires them to actually get there. And we might try it. But then when it doesn't work, then you step up the level of treatment.
Right.
And it's difficult, but I would say that just about everyone who graduated this past year in drug court, in AIR anyway, went to jail at some point and went to residential. And then came through residential, then go back into the community. We all go home. That's
Right.
our most comfortable place.
Right.
But you have to be able to fashion your life to be able to go home in a drug-free way. So that's really, the residential beds are very short, and that's a terribly big problem for us. We want to put people in residential. If we had more residential beds, we would all be very happy, I think, Judge
I think
Brooks
that's
and
probably the biggest service gap right now.
That's a very
Having a
big,
place to
yeah.
put
Yeah,
them.
and, I think it's
Yeah.
funny because you talk to people about drug court sometimes, and they'll say, Are you suggesting that this is coerced treatment? And I'm saying, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
That's exactly what it
absolutely
is.
Yeah, there's
Well,
no
it has
question
to
about
be.
it.
Right. And I've also had people say, I would tell you at a civic group about drug court, and they say, oh, I'd love to have my daughter or my son be able to come to the drug court. And I say, well, that's great, but first they have to get arrested and convicted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's not a program that you just enter like a residential program. And then there are a lot of misconceptions about what the programs are. Has been a misconception that a sober house was a treatment program. And it's
Which, of
not.
course,
It's
is
a
not.
house where people have agreed they're going to be sober there, but they need a treatment component. Now, some sober houses do have treatment components, but I think that, I've had probationers say, well, I'm at a sober house, everything's okay.
Right. But you got to get to the point of being sober before you go into the sober house,
That's
not
right.
once you
That's
get
right.
there.
That's right.
So,
Yeah, that's on
Yeah.
the other side of,
Right.
of residential treatment, not the front side.
Exactly.
Some people try it on the front side, and if we're persuaded that it's worth trying, we will. I think historically it doesn't.
Yeah,
work.
I would agree. And that's one of the values, as Judge Pearson and I have done drug court for years, is you actually, as in anything, you learn from experience. I'm a different drug court judge now than I was when I started, I guarantee you that. But I think my work as a drug court judge informs my regular work as a judge, because so many of our cases, as Judge Pearson said, involve drugs and alcohol anyway. So the kind of questions I ask of probationers, or defendants, I should say, the kind of recommendations I will accept as a judge, the kind of sentences I give out as a judge, definitely affected by what I've learned as a drug court judge.
Yep. And many times when someone comes into drug court after being convicted or pled out, or however they happen to get there, probation, they have no drug or alcohol charges on their record.
That-
Would you say that's true? Even though we know that the basis for
It
them
happens.
being
Certainly
there,
you see that.
Sure.
You see. I have people in my drug court who the charge that they're in drug court for is a motor vehicle offense.
Sure.
But even though they have a history in the past of other offenses that indicate drug abuse or addiction.
Right.
But the offense that they happen to be in court and probation for is negligent operation.
Right, right. Well, we've come close to our half hour, and I want to thank both of you for being on. It's been a pleasure, and pleasure seeing both of you again. And I'm sure your continued work in drug court will be a success, as it has been. And hope to have you back again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ernie.
Okay, and for all of you out there, I want to thank my doctor, Dr. Hyde, for helping me get through this show, because I've been dealing with a wicked cold all week, and I can actually speak today. So it was a great advancement from Monday. And he's at Groton Medical Center in Groton. So thanks, Doc. At any rate, we hope to see you all come back next month and see the show that we do at that time. Thanks a lot for watching.